TRPA is currently in the process of analyzing a set of proposed policies that will help us meet both our housing and environmental goals. And we've been working with public and our advisory bodies over the last couple of years on this particular phase of work that we're in. We presented a pretty robust policy package with about 25 recommendations for individual code changes to our governing board in November of 2025. And we had several hearings with them, which ended in February 2026. And then the governing board gave us the go-ahead to advance those policies into an environmental analysis phase. So we're now in that phase, and we'll be coming back to the governing board and the public with a draft environmental document for public review and for governing board review we'll be coming out with the public review draft in the fall, and then we'll be coming back to the governing board for their consideration, likely in the spring of 2027. And so this effort is called the Tahoe Living Strategic Initiative, and the current phase of work that we're in is called Cultivating Community, Conserving the Basin. So since the environmental analysis phase takes a while, can take, over 6 months, basically. We just wanted to be able to stay familiar, keep ourselves and our partners and the public familiar with the material, and also just be able to talk about not all of the policy proposal at once, kind of break it into bite-sized pieces so people have a chance to dig in and ask questions and really understand it, and not have to be like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix absorbing like a whole package all at once. And so the way we're experimenting with this format, feel free to let us know how you like it. We'll have a survey at the end of these kind of casual coffee hours where we're both presenting the policies, but also bringing in practitioners in the field who have actual experience using TRPA's policies, using local policies and state regulations to try to produce affordable and workforce housing. So we want to hear from them, like what's working, what's not working. And with accessory dwelling units, we know there's, a range of, people have a range of impressions about how these might work or not work. Everything from thinking, oh, every single house is gonna add an accessory dwelling unit, to the other side of people saying like, these policies might still not go far enough and we might not really see much movement. So that's when we just kind of wanna use Erin's expertise today to dig into that a little bit more. And so, for anyone who's new to the process, I think most of you your names are familiar to me, but if you're coming in new to the process, you might hear some terms that are unfamiliar to you, some planning concepts. One of the things that we really want to do with this Tahoe Living process is to help the public understand how TRPA's environmental protections and land use planning really works. So we've created a set of tools on our Tahoe Living webpage, and you can go to www.tahoeliving.org. We have fact sheets about this Tahoe Living process. We also have a series of videos, including some very short videos from 3 minutes to 8 minutes, that just try to explain as simply as possible some of these key concepts like development rights, bonus units, coverage, things like that, affordable, moderate, achievable workforce housing. So we really encourage you to go and check those out. There's also longer form videos that explain where we've been in the process. And you're also welcome to ask questions throughout this. If you don't understand a term, feel free. And I'm going to put these links in the chat right now. Can you guys see the links that I already put in that are at the top? Those of you that joined later. Oh, whoops, sorry, that's the wrong one. Don't click on that yet. I just want to put the Tahoe Living link in. Could somebody who joined late, like maybe Stephanie, could you let me know if you can see the links that are at the top, the Tahoe Living webpage link, and then the key terms link?
I don't think I do see those. I might be looking in the wrong place though.
Okay. No, that's okay. I think they don't show up if you joined after I put them in. So I'll put them in a little bit later while Erin's doing her presentation. But you can just go to tahoeliving.org to find these. Okay, so I just have two slides to kind of put in context where we are at in the process. As I mentioned, we are that we're in the process of completing an environmental analysis on this package of proposals that are really geared towards providing more housing and maintaining and achieving our environmental thresholds. So any change that we propose to the regional plan, including our code of ordinances, requires an environmental analysis. We can't adopt policy changes that have a significant impact on any of our environmental thresholds. So we have a consultant who's working on an environmental impact statement that will analyze the policies and determine if they will have an impact, then what mitigations would be needed to ensure that we won't have an environmental impact going forward. And part of the environmental analysis process is to look at different alternatives. So this environmental impact statement will have three alternatives: the no project alternative, which means we would keep the current land use patterns and commute patterns that we have today, so no change to our codes. We're looking at a proposal called, or an alternative called Housing Forward, and that is the proposal that we developed through the public input process. And this alternative primarily focuses on ensuring that as much of the remaining development that TRPA allows is constructed as housing that is affordable to our local workforce. So this alternative looks at supporting a range of workforce housing options, including rental apartments, townhomes, duplexes through fourplexes, and accessory dwelling units, but all within our existing development limits. And then finally, we have a third alternative, which we're calling the housing preservation alternative. And this one emerged through public comments on the environmental scoping document, which is part of our environmental process. And this one evaluates meeting the housing need through incentivizing local jurisdictions to use the tools that they have to unlock underutilized homes or vacant housing stock. So again, this process looks at the impacts and benefits of each of these alternatives. It'll analyze whether any mitigation is needed, and we need to coordinate with public safety agencies. That's part of our environmental process. And once the environmental review draft comes out, we'll have public workshops on the North Shore and South Shore to introduce the document and go over it with the public. And that will be we're expecting that to be in the fall. Okay, so there's just the one last slide I have before I want to turn to Erin to describe her programs. I just wanted to put up a slide that describes the policies that are directly related to accessory dwelling units that aim to make this housing type more feasible. So overarching for all of these, basically the goal with all of these is to make accessory dwelling units and these smaller housing types more feasible. So technically they are allowed in our code, but because our codes are actually really geared more towards single family homes, a lot of the regulations that we have, they don't work very well for encouraging smaller housing types like accessory dwelling units. So these five code or policy proposals are geared towards kind of right sizing our codes so that we can account for the needs of these types of housing units, not treat them like a large single family home. And yeah, these are the types of housing that generally can provide naturally affordable housing for local families and workers. So I'm going to just go over these briefly, and then I'll put this slide up again when after we've heard from Erin and when we're in the discussion in case people have questions about them. But the first policy is that what we're studying is whether accessory dwelling units could use bonus units to be built as long as the accessory dwelling unit is not used as a short-term rental. And I'll just briefly explain what bonus units are. Because TRPA has development limits, if you want to go out and build a home, you can't just go out and build it. You have to get permission to build, and that permission is called a development right. And TRPA has recognized that And those development rights, they come with a cost. They generally can add about $30,000 to the cost of a home. And so TRPA has set aside a pool of those development rights to give away basically for free to projects that meet regional plan goals and help us meet regional environmental goals and other goals in our regional plan. So what we heard from the public is that accessory dwelling units should be eligible for this type of incentive as long as they are not being used as short-term rentals. And doing this would reduce a significant cost for accessory dwelling units. The next proposal is to consider a junior accessory dwelling unit part of a single family home. And a junior accessory dwelling unit is essentially repurposing a bedroom to be a locked off unit. They have to be less than 500 square feet in size. They don't have to have a separate bathroom from the main house. They do need to have some kitchen facilities, but not a full kitchen. And so these are, they're often used to support, having an aging parent live in the home or a college student, or they can facilitate, home sharing, having roommates. So they basically kind of provide a dignified living space for family members and roommates by repurposing spare bedrooms. And just right now, as background, our code treats a junior accessory dwelling unit and a regular accessory dwelling unit essentially like a single family home. So they have all the same regulations as if you're building a large single family home. So the second to last one, allow additional coverage for accessory dwelling units when they can fully treat their runoff to TRPA's water quality standards. So this essentially allows the footprint that is needed for a homeowner to provide an accessory dwelling unit, as long as they're showing that they can still treat their runoff. And then finally, there's some fee reductions that are proposed. Again, as I mentioned, TRPA treats ADUs like a single family home, so they're paying essentially the same fees. This would look at some tiered fee reductions, with the highest fee reductions like waiving quite a few fees if the accessory dwelling unit is deed restricted to low or moderate income housing, and then cutting the fees in half for accessory dwelling units, for other accessory dwelling units, as long as they aren't being used as a short-term rental. So, and all of these are in that second alternative, the housing forward alternative. So I'll put this slide up again and we can talk more about it. But for now, I want to now turn to Erin and let her talk a little bit about her programs. And then I'll have a few questions for her, and then we can go to questions from the attendees.
First of all, I'm really happy to be here to talk about the program that the Hub has. I do think it's important to say I am here to share information about a program that we are running in Eastern Placer County in the Tahoe Basin, so on the California side. So there may be some questions that are specific to Nevada that I may or may not have answers to, number one. And then number two, I'm not here to advocate one way or another. This presentation from me is simply to share with you what we are doing. The policies that Karen just described, I know are under current environmental review. And so once that environmental review comes out, there'll be a lot of information for all of us to digest. So I just want to make sure that that distinction is clear to the group as we move forward. And I hope, Karen, if there are questions specific to those policies, that you are available to answer them, because I won't be able to cover that in detail. So I'm going to cover really two things today. The first is a program, our flagship program, which we call the ADU Accelerator Program. And so I think, as all of you know, building housing in Tahoe, it is hard, it is expensive, and it takes a lot of time. And it really does take a very specific technical skill set, because depending on where you are within the Tahoe Basin, you have to work with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency as well as the local jurisdictions within that community, which does add a layer of complexity that is rare when you're developing any kind of project outside of the Tahoe Basin. Our two primary strategies right now, I would say both on the Hub and on the Housing Trust Tahoe side, is the ADU Accelerator Program, as well as what we call naturally occurring affordable housing acquisition. So what we mean when we say NOAA is existing properties that are serving as rentals that are already somewhat naturally affordable. Generally, these are properties that are older, and they've been serving as rentals to local members of the community for many, many years. And so I can get into a little bit more detail on why we think that is an important strategy for our region, in addition to talking at a high level about the ADU accelerator. Next slide. So our first ADU is actually under construction. We began the program it was actually 2 years ago in July. And the ADU accelerator for us is modeled after an existing program in the state of California that is managed by another nonprofit called Hello Housing. And their program was called Hello ADU. And the way it works is they provide free technical assistance. It's generally funded by a local jurisdiction. And that free technical assistance helps a property owner from design to permitting to construction management and lease up support at no cost to them, so long as they don't short-term rent the property and agree to certain terms to make those units available as workforce or affordable housing in the community. And so we looked at this model. We actually heard of it through Mountain Housing Council and felt that maybe we could adapt such a program for our region. And so we were funded 2 years ago by the Martis Fund and the North Tahoe Community Alliance to pilot the program. And just 2 years later, we have our very first ADU under construction. This is actually in Truckee. So we work specifically within the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District boundaries, which includes Eastern Placer County, as well as Truckee and parts of unincorporated Nevada County. And so you can see the property owner, she's sitting there on the rock on the left-hand side, very proud, very excited. When we first started working with her, she'd had some challenges with a company that she had hired to develop a prefab unit for her. And so when we came to her, she was kind of lost, not sure where to start. Did she want to continue to move forward? What did she want to do? And so I think we're really proud of this project and proud of the partnership that we have with her. This will be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ADU. It will be available for rent in the fall of this year. Next slide. So as I mentioned, part of the model of the program is we work with homeowners from project idea through construction to lease up. And in our experience, so first of all, let me just mention that the vast majority of clients who come to us are locals. These are full-time local members of the community. They own their property. They largely want to do, most of them are motivated because they understand, they hear a lot about the housing issues, they want to do something. And so they come to us and say, I have never managed a project before. I've never built anything. I also have a full-time job doing something else. I have kids. I have whatever. I don't know where to start. And so that is our client base. Those are the individuals that come to us. And so given that we work through the feasibility analysis when it comes to the Tahoe Basin, all of you are very aware, I think, of the different aspects of that, from land use to zoning. Do you have the coverage? Are you in the bonus unit boundary? What is the code? Do you have septic? All of that gets looked at to determine what's even possible on the site to begin with. And then once we do that work and determine what can be done, then the next piece of that is the financing aspect of the project. Most of our clients need financing for their project. They don't have resources outside of going to a bank or acquiring other lending to do the project. And as many of you know, the interest rates when it comes to bank financing in the last couple of years has not been amazing for people. And so that's been one of the biggest challenges for our clients is the funding of that project. And so we try to provide some assistance when it comes to putting them in touch with a potential lender to have conversations over what might be possible for them to fund their actual project. In addition to that, we as a team bring in mission-aligned consultants and contractors. We actually hire them to work with our team. Shelley works directly with them. They are specifically, in our case and in the basin, they are land use experts who understand Tahoe Regional Planning Agency code and also work with the local jurisdictions and move back and forth between both. And that's really important because if you don't have somebody who works locally, who understands how the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency operates and how the code from TRPA intersects with the local jurisdictions code. That can actually cost someone time and money if they've hired the wrong person, which, believe it or not, happens quite a bit in our area. Hire somebody from outside of the area, whether it's an architect, an engineer, or a planner, and they don't understand the TRPA component to it, and that can really set someone back. And so we ensure that we are curating a team of specialists who do understand the context of the local community, which adds tremendous value to the program and to the property owner. We also provide project management. So once we move into the construction phase, we're actually supporting the project management side of that, the construction management. And we also operate, so these are two, I'd say, sort of market rate terms that you are out there in the market. So maybe you've heard of a homeowner's rep. This is somebody who works alongside a homeowner through a project. They're an advocate on behalf of that homeowner, as well as working with the construction team to ensure the project is moving forward as it should be and is on time and within budget. And then we work very closely with the Tahoe Truckee Workforce Housing Agency on the lease-up side to help that homeowner find the right individual, make sure that they are meeting the expectations that we have of working with a local worker to be placed within that unit. And so we partner where we can to ensure that a homeowner has that assistance as well. Next slide, please. So the other piece of what we're beginning to work on through the trust is no acquisition, as I mentioned. So this is often referred to as naturally occurring affordable housing. And what we're working on is identifying existing units that are, in many cases, older units in our community that are serving as rentals. In many cases, these are multifamily properties, trying to identify a potential seller who would be willing to work with us so that we can obtain that property and protect and preserve it in perpetuity, deed restrict it. And what I think is really valuable about that for our area, particularly in the basin, is because we're not going to build our way out of this issue, as we all know. And so we have several units on the eastern Placer County side in the Tahoe Basin, in both Kings Beach and Tahoe City. They're multifamily properties. They've been serving as long-term rentals for, in some cases, decades. And at some point, those properties are going to convert. The existing owner is either going to sell them, hand them down, do something with them. And we want to make sure that they stay as affordable units in the community. And so that's part of what we're trying to do, is look at existing properties and protect them. And we think that will have a real environmental impact as well on the positive side, because the more housing we can actually preserve, the more people we have actually living where they work, and that helps us to reduce VMT as well. So it's become a huge priority for us, and it is the top goal of the trust right now to identify those properties, work those relationships, and obtain a property or a few of those properties and keep them protected in perpetuity. Part of how it works, what's the incentive to somebody to sell? We are a 501c3. And so if somebody donates all of the property or a portion of it, in some cases, somebody may say, I'll donate the land. I want the tax write-off from that, but I'll sell you the home, and or I will sell you the whole thing, but I will sell it to you at a reduced rate. And then the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value of the property is a write-off for that particular individual. And so we're looking to facilitate those types of deals in the community, as well as leveraging other incentives and financing tools to purchase those types of units and properties where we have a willing seller. And we're in the process of working with estate planning partners, plan giving, land, et cetera. Believe it or not, there are quite a few nonprofits in our area that do receive donations of property on a fairly frequent basis. And so we want to position ourselves to be able to receive those properties as well, but hold on to them so they remain affordable and rentals to the workforce. Next slide. Yeah, so I guess that was it. Those are my slides.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really like how you mentioned, particularly for the ADUs, that you're working with other, groups, nonprofits, and agencies. So it's not just about getting the unit on the ground. Then you work with the Tahoe Truckee Workforce Housing Authority to help find a renter, maybe with Placer County with some of their programs. So it kind of
Yes.
takes a lot of different agencies to make these happen.
Yes.
Um, Cool, thank you. That was great. So I'm gonna kick it off with just a couple of questions, and I just also wanted to reiterate kind of what Erin mentioned at the beginning. Since we're in the environmental review process, we're not really at a stage where we're trying to like collect input on these policies right now, and we're not asking any of you to like advocate for or against a policy, and we're certainly not asking Erin, our speaker, to do that either. But we are just wanting to use everyone's expertise in the room to just better understand how what these policies might look like once they're implemented on the ground, so that once the environmental analysis comes out and we're in a public comment phase again, you'll be more informed to speak to, what you support or what you have concerns about. So with that, I will start off with a couple of questions, and I do want to apologize. If you put in a question when you registered, I have not been able to see those questions, unfortunately, due to my own lack of technical understanding of Zoom. So please put your question in again if you had a question. But I'll kick it off, and then we'll turn to the chat and to people raising hands. So, Erin, you
Mhm.
talked about some of the kind of uh, financial like hurdles that people need to overcome getting financing for their accessory dwelling unit. Could you talk both about like the average cost that you're seeing to build an accessory dwelling unit in
Mhm.
Placer County? And then maybe could you also just mention like how many people approach you interested in building an accessory dwelling unit versus the number that actually result in a permitted project?
Yeah. I'll start with the cost. So for a stick-built accessory dwelling unit, meaning ground up development, starting from scratch, in general, we're looking at least a $500,000 investment, generally higher than that for that
Mm-hmm.
construction. And I think what's important, at least what we've learned, and again, I'm speaking specifically, just to be clear, about the client base that we work with. And
Mm-hmm.
so there may be others that fall in a different category that have a very different feeling about this and a different set of circumstances that may fall outside of what I am saying. But when it comes to our program, part of what we require is that people rent these units to a local worker and or keep the property at fair market rents as defined by HUD. And so that means that the rent is going to be lower than what they could charge if they were to build this and rent it to anybody. And so if you're going to invest at least $500,000 at least in a stick-built product and then turn around and cap the rent, for the majority of our clients, that doesn't work because they're in the red already. They've built the rent that's going to come in will not service the debt that they have taken on to build that unit. And so because of that, many of our clients, we have had over 80 people within our focus area. So not just in the Tahoe Basin, but throughout the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District boundary, fill out an application since the program began. I would say we've had about that many meetings, about 15 minutes at least, to explore with them what the feasibility is. In the first year of our program, we we had, I think, about 60 people sign up who would
Mm-hmm.
initially meet with us, understand the cost, meet with a financial professional, and drop out. And so we had a ton of people express interest, and we had nobody moving past that stage. I mean, like zero, to the point where we were starting to ask ourselves, is this program workable in our region? Because the
Mm-hmm.
financial constraints are so significant for our clients who are doing it because they want to provide workforce and affordable housing to a local worker. And so what we then did is we started looking at ways to bring the construction costs down for people. And so there are a variety of ways you can do that too. There's a lot of innovative and interesting construction evolution that's happening in this space. And
Mm-hmm.
so looking at prefabricated units, things that are being built offsite in part brought up here, pieced together, or entirely built offsite and then brought up into our area. Because the other constraints that we have, Karen, not just the cost, is the construction timelines that we have. As you all know,
Mm-hmm.
we have very constrained timeframes for building up here. And so sometimes a year-long delay in a project in our area can substantially increase the costs of that project. And when you have such a fragile system already for someone who's investing a fair amount of money into a project who's trying to then provide that to someone who can't afford significant rent, a year-long delay with an increase in the cost can kill their
Yeah.
project. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the second year of our program, because we were able to find a few different companies who provide, who have some products that are workable for our region, we have more people actually moving through the entire process from construction, or excuse me, from feasibility to construction. So we have several MOUs for a total of, I think, 28 units within our entire
Mm-hmm.
region in the queue. Now, whether or not all of
Okay.
those move forward, I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
if I had to guess, I would say maybe half of those will happen within between now and next summer. But
Okay.
the drop off is substantial given the cost of construction and the complexity of building up here. The final thing I'll add is part of what increases the cost is that we have significant demands on the structures that we build here on the
Mm-hmm.
engineering side, given the snow loads that we have, the wind,
Mm-hmm.
the fire. So, believe it or not, a lot of what we were doing is looking for ADU products in places like Mammoth, parts of the West, where they also have
Mm-hmm.
significant snow loads. We have some of the highest snow loads in the country. And those snow
Mm-hmm.
loads they just increased January 1, which
Mm-hmm.
means in some places they've actually doubled, which means the
Mm-hmm.
engineering that has to go into a unit is substantially greater, which means then the unit that's then constructed has additional infrastructure built into it, which drives the cost up. And so
Mm.
there are several layers of things that add to the challenges of moving a project from concept to
Yeah.
completion for people who are interested in our program.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
I see John Falk has his hand up. I'm going to call on John, and while John's speaking, I'm going to advance the slide as I promised so that you can see TRPA's policies. And I'm also going to put the links in the chat that I mentioned that I would. So let's see, John, do you want to go ahead with your question? John, did you hear me? Can you
Can
unmute?
you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, now I can.
Yay! Um, uh, Thank you very much for this, by the way. It's been invaluable to me just to hear uh, how much you're doing and frankly, how on top you are of the issues that I had on my list of things to discuss. So first off, kudos to all of you. Erin, you brought up some of the things that I was on both iterations of the Mountain Housing Council as a director. And one of the things we looked at was prefab ADUs, and the snow load issue is an issue. And we've actually had some very cursory discussions with, could we have an option, with an additional cost built in to have snow load factored into a prefab version, like, 1A, or maybe you want S for snow, or
Mhm.
whatever. And that would lower the cost. And then the other one that we found that's been helpful in reducing cost is Town of Truckee has done it, is having a series of pre-approved plans for ADUs so that you not only streamline the process as far as hiring people and running it through the process, but it saves a ton of money as well. And
Right.
so if working hand in glove with the county and TRPA, you can develop some pre-approved plans that if you choose this form, this structure, that it's going to fly right through because it's
Mhm.
already been met, all the requirements that have been reviewed. So I wanted to bring those things up. And then the only other thing that I'll say briefly is I I very much appreciate the concept of separating ADUs from looking at them as standalone units from TRPA's perspective, because it really is a major impediment to creating additional housing, especially on the affordable end. And we've always, Tahoe Sierra Board of Realtors has always been a strong proponent of affordable by design. In other words, deed restrictions are a major disincentive because that, rides with the title in perpetuity. But if you have a maximum square footage, then it becomes affordable by design. And so for ADUs that don't allow for STRs, as long as they meet certain parameters as far as structural size, then I think that makes sense. Now, for the homes that are older, that are already existing, deed restricting those it seems reasonable given, what you're trying to accomplish. But for new ADUs, I think that deed restrictions are probably ill-advised. But with that, the only other point I would suggest you look into is HUD rates don't work in any part of California. They just, I don't even know if they work in Iowa, but they don't meet our market. And so if there's any way that you can have a local staircase to show, like that missing middle that everyone speaks of, which is that group of people that want to live here, that do work here, that can't afford to live here, that group will not qualify under HUD and yet needs the housing. And so if there's a way to massage that without losing funding sources, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And Karen, I just have a couple of comments and responses to a couple of things John said. Thank you for the comments, John. On one of your initial comments on a prefab that is engineered, we actually have done that with a company called Clever Tiny Homes for the exact reason you described. In fact, so we have vetted, I think Shelley has vetted now 33 companies in the West.
38, up to 38 now.
38 companies. Most of them, the majority of them either they do not build their products or engineer them to our code, certainly not recently. And in some cases, they have business structures that we're not confident in. We have seen people lose significant dollars to some of these companies in their early stages. And so the vetting of those companies, we've realized, become very important. And so with Clever, they have actually re-engineered some of their models to meet our snow load requirements alongside an engineer who works locally, who specifically understands to make sure the roofs are designed to tolerate that. So our clients have that as an option. And in fact, there's a church client that we have that's going to be installing 3 of these tiny homes, we think on foundations. There'll be 2-bedroom units. And part of the reason they're able to do it is 1, they're more affordable to do. And 2, the owner has re-engineered the product so that it does meet our snow load requirement here locally. So you're right, John, that's part of what we have to do. And we're like in the middle of that right now, trying to make that happen for people. I did also want to mention on the pre-approved plans, I think part of what those are designed to do is obviously to reduce costs, as you said, John. Part of what we also think is associated with that is creating sort of a repeatable roadmap that's easier for people to move through the entire permitting process because it is complex. I mean, it really is. And when you've got new staff coming in, whether it's TRPA or in our case, Placer, and they have to get up to speed on how these 2 agencies and their codes intersect, what the sentiment of the community is, it takes time. And so, especially when it comes to things like this. And so really being able to push some of work through the process, understand it, make sure we're all on the same page, we're meeting everybody's expectations. That helps the next time. That helps the next person coming through a process. So I think you're absolutely right, John. That's part of it. And we see this whole working process that we have, taking that idea and moving it through the whole phase of a project. And then I just wanted to clarify on the HUD rates. What I meant by that is HUD has fair market rents, which means our homeowner clients wouldn't charge rent higher than that. But they would allow, as long as somebody works locally, they could live in those units. So it's really designed to just ensure that they don't build these units and then charge super high rents to people who would be then living in them. So that's what I meant by that. But I hear what you're saying on where that doesn't work in other ways, but just to be clear on what the way we use them.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. That's it, Karen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You might have explained this already, as possible, I missed it, but how do you ensure that the units that people are building through your program are used for local workforce housing and don't become used as something else?
So
Like,
we require so the technical assistance that we provide is
yeah.
valued roughly around up to $30,000 in terms of the service that we either provide
Mhm.
directly or hire someone to bring in. And so what we require, there's two options somebody has. They either have to rent it to a local worker without any kind of restriction on the rent who works 30 hours or more in the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District boundary.
Mhm.
Or they do it for 3 years. They have that HUD fair market rent, which means they're charging a much lower rent, which means the units are then affordable to somebody who is going to be at a lower income, but they're not managing against that lower income piece. Because I do want to mention something on deed restrictions. Um, Homeowners for us are they're a different client and they're a different client than a business, right? Most traditional affordable housing or any kind of workforce housing is generally developed by a business, and a person behind a corporate structure, whether it's an LLC or something. It's not, and this is somebody building a project, they're not living on site. They have the staff to manage the deed restrictions, to manage the monitoring, to provide all the different income requirements. What we're doing, what's hard and challenging about ADUs is we want to utilize it as a strategy, but we've got homeowners who are in the middle of that, and we're applying these incentive requirements to a homeowner who is living on site with the person they're renting to, and then so they're investing a significant amount of their own money, and then they're also then having to take on managing, in some cases, a 55-year deed restriction. That's a
Mhm.
lot to ask of an individual. But I also understand that they're getting an incentive. So how do you find the right balance there is the question I think
Mhm.
we're all trying to answer. I will acknowledge our homeowners work with us because our requirements are appropriate given the value of what they're providing. And it weeds, like the people who are in our program want to do something for the workforce. They're all there for that reason. And even that
Mhm.
5-year requirement is enough to eliminate anyone who might want to work with us who's not interested in that. But we do hear
Mhm.
from people who do not move
Yeah.
forward with incentives because they don't want to the deed restriction for them feels too onerous to manage
Yeah.
over a 55-year time frame. So take what you will with that. I am not, again, advocating one way or the other. It's just the reality of homeowner clients as people who are behind a solution that we are all trying to leverage. And how do we find the balance between ensuring that we're getting what we want out of it, but not saddling them with a requirement that's totally unrealistic
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah. Okay, I'm happy to take more questions if anybody else has one. I'm not seeing hands raised, so I will just continue to ask questions. Oh, Amelia has a question. Amelia, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. And thank both of you. This has been really great. And yeah, envious of everyone on the North Shore that gets to take advantage of such a great program. The question I had, Erin had mentioned bonus unit boundary. So, and that's actually not something I knew much about. So, Karen, given that it sounds like the policy proposal that ADUs may be able to use bonus units so as to not have to purchase. Um, the development rights, can you speak to if there's going to be some geographical limits as to where those will be able to be used?
Thanks, Amelia, for the question. So the proposal that's being analyzed right now basically says that if an accessory dwelling unit can use a bonus unit as long as it's not being used as a short-term rental, regardless of the location. So we're basically saying, hey, the bonus unit is to incentivize affordable and workforce housing, and that can go anywhere in the basin. We're still going to have, we're changing basically the name of the bonus unit boundary to a transportation incentive zone. And so for ADUs or any kind of development that goes within that transportation incentive zone, it's basically the boundary that's close to transit. They would have additional waivers related to transportation mitigation fees, for instance. And we're going to encourage duplexes through fourplexes within that transportation incentive zone. But no, for ADUs, the way the proposal is worded, they would be able to take advantage of the bonus units regardless of the location.
Awesome. Thanks so much for clarifying.
Mm-hmm. So back to the deed restrictions while I'm waiting to see if anybody else has a question. And we scheduled this until 1:30, but we'll probably end a little bit early, but we do still have some time for questions and discussion if there's more questions out there. So I don't know, Erin, if you maybe have a sense of this. You started to speak to it that homeowners don't want to take on a 55-year deed restriction, or in the case of TRPA, it's a in perpetuity deed restriction.
Mhm.
Do you have a sense, for those people that decided not to go with your program,
Mhm.
do you have a sense of how they intended to use the unit?
Well, so for us, the people that I'll speak to our client base first, the people who don't move forward in our program, I would say 98% of them, it's because of the financing. It's too expensive. And
Yeah.
then to then be required to, even for 3 to 5 years, they're like, it doesn't pencil for me. I will be losing money after I spend all of this. To be honest with you, we haven't had a situation where somebody has come to us with some other intended use for an accessory dwelling unit outside of people who are looking to assist the workforce. I think, well, there are some situations, I suppose, let me take that back. I think maybe we had early on 1 or 2 people who wanted to house a family member, an elderly parent, for example, a senior. So there are situations like that emerge. But we even had, and I know this comes up sometimes, no one has reached out to build an ADU to then short-term rent it or just rent it or let friends come use it. Because those are, just to be clear, if you can afford to build an ADU and then not rent it, you don't need, like, that's a very different client base than the individuals that come to us. That they're not in that situation. They need the rent revenue to service the debt that they have. And so generally the people who don't qualify aren't qualifying because they want to use it for a member who is not working in the community. And our funding sources are specifically tied to supporting the workforce.
I see.
Right. And so those are some of the cases where that would occur in our situation. But it's very rare, but it has happened a couple of times where that's the intended use of the unit.
Okay. And could you talk a little bit more about the financing? And again, I'm sorry, since I was trying to advance the slides, I might not have heard everything that you said, but are people, if they like the cost is large enough, but then are there opportunities if they can afford that and want to go forward with it? Is it easy enough to get the financing to get a loan, or are there other hurdles to get a loan for an accessory dwelling unit that are different than building a single family home? And again, apologize if you already talked about this.
No, I mean, they look at different ways. Like one is a home equity line of credit. And generally those have pretty high interest rates on them. People can refinance their homes, but in some cases, if they refinance, they will end up with a higher interest, so they can extract the equity out of their existing unit. But a lot of people that we have worked with, okay, again, our client base, they have better interest rates than we all have right now. So none of them want to refinance their 3.5% mortgage in order
Yeah.
to leverage it and then have to refinance at 6, 7, 8%. It doesn't work for them. So the dynamics of the market have not been
Mm-hmm.
favorable for lending for people over the last few years. They just haven't in our case. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the challenge, right? And so then they're like, oh my God, I gotta spend $500,000, maybe even more. That's on the low end at
Yeah.
a significant interest rate, and I've got to manage a rental, and I got to do this and I got to do that. So those are the financing constraints, which is why, I mean, we couldn't do anything about interest rates. We're like, we can't solve that
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what we might be able to do is help bring the cost down over here so that it does pencil for somebody. I will
Mm-hmm.
add that we do work with, so for example, Placer County has an incentive program they call Launchpad.
Mm-hmm.
Launchpad will pay for deed restrictions on new development. It does include accessory dwelling units. For accessory
Mm-hmm.
dwelling units, they will pay currently $125,000 for that deed
Mm-hmm.
restriction. And there have been some of our clients have been interested in that,
Mm-hmm.
but only because they have a
Mm-hmm.
prefab option that is
Mm-hmm.
very affordable now. And so the two
Mm-hmm.
together make it worth it to them to deal with the deed restriction. So the incentive has to be significant enough to move people in that
Mm-hmm.
setting. And so, but
Mm-hmm.
I will also add there are many homeowners who have considered
Mm-hmm.
Launchpad who have said no to it because they do not want to deal with the associated deed restriction either. So
Mm-hmm.
it's moved the needle a little bit for a small number of
Mm-hmm.
people, but many people still say no thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so
There's just so many pieces that need to fall into place.
yeah, it's a formula to me, the way I see it. It's like this formula, and Shelley and I talk all the time. Like it's this very long formula, and there's all these different components. Like this has to add to that, and this, when you think about complex math and you look at these equations and there's all these variables, like to me, that's what all has to come together to
Mm-hmm.
get a project to work. And
Mm-hmm.
every single one's a little bit different. Every single person's property is a little bit different. Their coverage,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
layers. We actually invest more on the front
Mm-hmm.
end of a project on the feasibility side because there's
Mm-hmm.
so much involved in it in the basin. So
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's important
Mm-hmm.
for us to all like be rooted in like how many layers of barriers there actually are. And
Yeah.
policy is part of that, but it's not all of it, man. Let me just tell you, there are variables
Yeah.
that are outside of policy. You could change your policies all day long, and that doesn't mean you
Yeah.
shouldn't. You absolutely should consider it, but we still have to navigate 100 different things to make a project work when it comes to ADUs with our client base. And that's just that's
Mm-hmm.
why our program is, I think, so necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just for anybody on the Launchpad program, we're actually going to have Placer County doing another one of these coffee hours with us on August 20th, and they're going to talk about the Launchpad program. I might stop sharing the screen for a minute because I want to put in a link to our accessory dwelling dashboard that shows like how many accessory dwelling units have been built around the basin, how many are permitted, just so people can see the progress that we have made despite the high costs. Actually, there have been quite a few ADUs built, which is sort of surprising given the costs, but yeah, so thank you, Erin, and thank you everyone who participated today. We really appreciate your questions and your thoughts. I have two more slides. I just wanted to highlight that, as I mentioned, on Thursday, August 20th, Placer County staff is going to come and speak about their programs in protection, preservation, and production of housing. So kind of looking at all the different avenues to provide housing. And as Erin mentioned, the Housing Hubs program interacts with their programs as well. Well, thanks again, everybody. Hope you have a great weekend.